We're getting lots of clients talking to us about their defined benefit,
Yes.
final salary schemes being closed by employers and needing some guidance with that. Can you perhaps give us a bit of background as to, well, two things. One is, why are employers closing these type of schemes? And secondly, why advice is so vital in that particular space?
Absolutely right. And I would, I'd say this, James, this is one of the most difficult areas to advise on. You need to always look at all the options. It is definitely not right for everybody. And we take this bit really seriously. And I know how specialised you are, particularly in advising clients in this market, and it's a long process. So if you start, and can I use me as an example, James? My life's full of examples. It's like a filing cabinet of examples today. Right, if you go back, I started work for Hambro Life above Swindon Station, a mile and a half from my house, and somebody asked me to sign a piece of paper that was the best piece of paper I've ever signed in my life, because I joined what was, can we just call it final salary schemes? It's much easier. A final salary scheme was provided for me. I was 20 years old on 1,800 quid a year. I left 26 and a half years later on slightly more money than that, which was fantastic, and it was non-contributory. So that meant that Ally Dunbar Zurich took on the responsibility of providing that scheme. As part of my redundancy deal, when I got me redundant, I could take my benefits at 55. So believe it or not, I'm actually a pensioner. I get paid from my final salary scheme and income every month. Right. Why? When I took my benefits 8 years ago, the market was different. And this is really important to understand. There is every client, every individual is different. So what might be right for one isn't right for another. But if you think about it, I use my mum as a great example. My mum, my dad worked for Nationwide, is a pensioner of Nationwide. I think probably Nationwide hate my mum. She's 96, she's lived out every actuarial assumption of how long she's going to live. So what's really happened with these schemes, they worked brilliantly where you worked until you're 65, but you died quite quickly. It sounds an awful thing to say, James, but it was true. So you pay in for a long time, but actually you didn't get paid out for a long time. So what actually happened was, as people's life expectancy started increasing, these schemes became more and more expensive, to the extent that some of the schemes, or in fact most of the schemes in the private sector, are now shut for new members. They've shut the scheme because what they're trying to do is cap what's called liability. So what they're saying is, we don't want any more liability, because also, James, I'm sure you've got some of your clients are businessmen and women. The one thing you don't want in business is an unknown liability on your books. It's a nightmare. So what they started to do was stop the schemes, and what you had is you've got your benefits up to that date are protected. Then what started to happen slowly but surely, really around the things of, I hate using this word pension freedoms because it's banded around, the world changed, and slowly but surely a lot of these schemes are now offering the deferred members, i.e. you used to be a member of that scheme, what is called a cash equivalent transfer value, i.e. an amount of money that you can take that basically means they're mitigating their liability, but it falls on the individual who now has to take that on. So whereas I get a guaranteed income for the rest of my life, if I took a cash equivalent transfer value, I'd have an amount of money that you'd help me invest in, and I have to decide if that's right or wrong for me. As I said, giving up a guarantee, you should always, always take advice. And the starting point for most clients, James, would be don't. Because you've got to have absolutely, this is really don't. So what schemes are trying to do is, it's a bit like any asset. We've had a conversation about this before. My house is my house is only worth what somebody's prepared to pay for it. It's a bit like a pension scheme. They're offering you an amount of money to mitigate their liability. And for some clients, going through that process, which can take between 3 and 6 months, understanding what you're giving up and what you're not giving up is important. I do it around something called, should I stay or should I go? Because I think I mentioned to you, I went out for a run, it doesn't look like it, listen to the Clash, and to a certain extent it gets it in my head. There are reasons to go and there are reasons to stay. The most important thing is, you need really solid advice, you need to understand the implications of giving up that guarantee, and also what the benefits are if you do give up that guarantee. And I know you guys do some cash flow modelling, which sounds very posy, but reality is what they do is sit down and explain exactly to the client what happens if, and we are really clear, we stress this, test this. It's a bit like when you manufacture something, we stress test it assuming that market's going to crash by 20%, what happens if? So a really long-winded answer to say that market is changing. There are market, I don't mean that. What we're seeing is clients, companies are actually offering transfer values. For some, the increased flexibility, the increased death benefits are really important to understand, but there's always a downside. So there's reasons for and reasons against. And I know, James, because I'm lucky enough to know you well, you are very clear and precise with this. It's a slow process, because it should be, because what we are finding, and I know you've seen this, some of these cash equivalent transfer values are up around the £1 million mark, which is a lot. It's lottery winning money, let's be honest. So I don't want any client to rush this. I don't want any client to feel they have to. If a client is interested and wants to talk to you, they really need to look at, which I know you guys do, look at all the reasons for, all the reasons against, and then make a decision based on that.
Yeah, and I think that's right. Anecdotally, we've seen transfer values over the past few years sort of reach all-time highs because of economic conditions. So, we have done an awful lot of work with clients in guiding them and through that process. So it's been very interesting.
But in venture, James, because I know you very well, but it takes time. And for some clients, they might say, this is what I want to do. Actually, by the time you pointed out what the downsides are, fun enough, it's not what they do, and vice versa. The key is, it's individual advice. You have to take advice on this. As you know, in St James's Place, you have to get your advice signed off. So it's not just you. We have a team. So we're very, very careful with this business. We want to make sure it's right for the client. And fun enough to me, say it was Nicole and myself, Nicole fully understands the implications of me making that transfer, because ultimately she would be the beneficiary of that fund. And believe it or not, it sounds really weird. This sort of links me back into perhaps something else I started to see changing. I'm getting my kids now involved in some of the decisions I'm making, so they understand why I'm making those decisions. So the intergenerational stuff that's bandied around, I think, is really important, because a pension is now an asset and an investment. How best to use that is now for the family. And I think that's back to, we started this conversation all those minutes ago about COVID. I think the family's become far more relevant, and how you help the family. I know, and it's just me, I'm keeping more cash back just at the minute, a little bit more cash back, just in case something happens to the family that I need to help out.
And we're noticing that across all of our clients, really, that people are taking a slightly more cautious view with their funds at the moment.
I think, and James, nobody knew what's going to happen. If I said to you in January when we met, oh, by the way, we're going to sit down, and I'm going to sit in my office, and you're going to sit in your office, and we're going to talk to a computer screen, you go, what are you talking about, Ian? So the world has changed that quickly. So to me, absolutely right. But that's the benefit of advice. Understanding you get a better picture of what's going on around, not just in Morpeth, but around the UK, and you're seeing trends. So I'm lucky enough to speak, just before I spoke to you, I speak to somebody in Scotland, so I get a very good feel around the country. And I think James and I, we both would say, we are very conscious that it's a difficult world out there. A lot of staff are furloughed. Businesses up in the northeast, you're seeing some major employers having to make some cuts and changes. Exactly the same in Swindon. Honda are shutting. The world is changing, and we're very aware of that. So making a decision has to be based on where you are, what you want, and understanding the risk associated with that.